All right, let's go ahead and get started this morning. First of all, welcome to Sunday School. Thanks for coming out. We'll start by taking some prayer requests. If you will remember one of my partners at work, Mr. Patrick Gallo. He's been on and off of our prayer list for a while now. But if we could put him back on there, he is going out on medical leave again. He's having some heart issues this time. So if you would remember him, Patrick Gallo. If you would remember me this morning, I woke up with some sinus issues, a little bit of a headache, more annoying than painful, but if you would remember me this morning. Others this morning? Miss Robin? Got you. Yes, ma'am. Others? Wendy? Right. Okay. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Shanna? Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, ma'am. Any others this morning? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Any others? Mr. Jack? Yeah. Yes, sir. All right. If not, we'll open up in prayer. Brother Jack Towns, do you mind opening us up this morning? Amen. All right. Well, today we're going to continue our study of Dr. A.B. Bruce's book, The Training of the 12. And we're going to be looking at chapter 29 this morning, which I believe is on page 197 of your books there. Like we said before in the past, sometimes the author gets to a subject, a particular subject or a topic in his book, and he'll spend a few chapters discussing that. So it is with the topic of self-sacrifice that we've been looking at for the past 3 weeks. Our lesson title this morning is The First Last and the Last First. And our focal passage is going to be in Matthew. We're going to be looking at chapter 19, just the very last verse of chapter 19, verse 30. And then we're going to continue on into chapter 20 and look at verses 1 through 16. We'll be looking at a couple other things, but this will be our primary text for most of our discussion this morning. We're actually going to pick up right back where we left off last week, kind of piggyback on some of the things that Brother Greg talked about concerning the rewards of self-sacrifice. And if you remember from last week, Peter asked a very honest question of Jesus, and he said, "We have forsaken everything to follow you. What will we have?" And as Jesus answers Peter and tells him of the reward, he issues a warning. The first will be last, and the last will be first. So let's dive right into this, and we'll look at our text this morning. Again, we're in Matthew chapter number 19, the very last verse, verse 30, and then moving straight into Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. The Bible says, "But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour, and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. Again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out, and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They said unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil, because I am good? So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen." So Jesus issues this warning, and immediately speaks a parable to the disciples. Jesus used parables a lot during his ministry. And if you remember, a few years ago, our pastor did a study. We did a series through many of the parables in the gospel. And if you remember what a parable is an earthly story. It's concerning spiritual truth. It's about kingdom life. It's a comparison. In verse 30 of chapter 19, Jesus is seen here in this verse arranging human positions as they appear from his throne. To his eye, many first are last, and many last are first. And he will, in his kingdom, place men, people, according to his divine order. He evaluates the work that we perform. So we see here, and we realize again, that God doesn't do as we humans do. And we should rejoice for that. We should be thankful for that. Because if you think just for a moment, spiritually speaking, do we really want fairness? Do we really want what we truly deserve? Did your children ever say, when they were growing up, those memorable words, well, that's just not fair. That's just not fair. Maybe you said it yourself, or at least thought it. Just like last week at work, I thought it a lot in my head. But it didn't take long in life. Found out at an early age that life here on this earth just isn't fair. And you know what? The kingdom of heaven isn't fair either. You may say, well, why is that? Because all the people that are there, including myself one day, don't deserve to be there. What I deserve is hell. But because of the work of Christ and nothing that I did, instead of getting what I deserved, I received grace. This is a parable of grace. So let's take some time. We want to go through it verse by verse, and we'll start with looking at verses 1 and 2 of Matthew chapter 20. It says, For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. The kingdom of heaven is all of grace, and so is the service connected with it. The call to work, the ability to do the work, the reward are all on the principle of grace. Nothing on merit. The householder, the landowner in this parable is no common man, no ordinary man. And his going out to hire laborers into his vineyard was not an unusual thing for a person, a man of his stature, to do of that day. The landowner considered the laborers rather than himself. He was up early, before the dew was gone from the grass, and he found laborers, and he sent them into his vineyard. They agreed with the landowner and went to work on his terms. They were content. They were promised a full day's wage, and then they knew that they would get it. Anticipation and expectation of that. Spiritually speaking, like believers, having a blessed hope, knowing that they have a loving master, that they are in a good place, and they are happy to do the work. Verses 3 and 4. And he went out about the third hour, and he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. The landowner, hating laziness, hating idleness, and upset that he saw others standing there idle in the marketplace, hired more workers about the third hour. This would be about 9 a.m. And they had about 3/4 of a work day left. In comparison, we could say that these laborers are like believers whose childhood maybe have passed them by, but they're still not old yet, and a good part of their life is still available for the service to the Lord. In verse 4, the landowner, the householder here, he didn't tell them a definite sum as he did the first group, but said, Whatever is right, I will give you. They went their way to their labor and to the work. They didn't want to remain as idlers, just standing by. They picked up their tools and they began to serve. Moving on to verses 5 through 7. Again, he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out, and he found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. If this had been just a business transaction, altogether and alone, just a business transaction, then the householder would not, or he would have waited to begin a new day and would not given a whole day's wage for just a fraction of the day's work. In verse 5, we see that he went out about noon, and then again about 3 p.m., and he hired more laborers. But see, this matter was not about a business transaction. This was about grace. The Lord calls people by His grace in the greatness of His love. If we look at these times of day as if they were years of life, like we did in the previous verses, then these laborers were getting old in age. We might say that maybe the usefulness of these folks maybe have passed them by. Maybe they have very little energy or exuberance. Maybe kind of in the twilights of their days, so to speak. They had spent their best days, their younger days, wallowing in sin. But the Lord can save anyone at any age. He has work for the weak as well as for the strong. He allows none to labor for Him without the reward of grace. This is no way any encouragement to procrastinate, but it should encourage and should prompt older sinners to seek Christ and to seek Christ now. In verse 6, we see the day was nearly over. Only a single hour remained. And yet, about the 11th hour, he went out. The householder, he was a generous man. This generous householder was willing to take on more workmen, to hire them out, even though the sun was going down, had very little light, and not much time to do the work. He found a group standing idle, And he plainly and he straightforwardly asked them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? He's asking them, you need work, right? You're able to work, right? Then why aren't you doing it? So I think, too, as believers, we need to ask ourselves from time to time, are we remaining idle towards God? Are we serving the Lord as we should? We can't by no means say, no man hath hired us, as the laborers said here. We need to be heading to the Lord's vineyard, picking up our tools, killing some weeds, pruning some vines in service to the Lord. What could lead this landowner, this householder here in this parable to take on these stragglers there at the inn at the 11th hour? It was grace. It was rich grace. He invites them as earnestly as those who came in the morning, the first ones, and he will surely give them their reward. Verses 8 and 9, it says, So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. The workday had come to an end, and it was pay time. It was payday. Y'all ever get excited about payday? That's why I go to work. It's that one day a week. The Lord of the vineyard did not forget about his agreement with the laborers there, nor did he tell them to wait for the wages. He didn't say, well, you need to wait a few days, got to get some things in order, and I'll pay you. No, he didn't. He saw to everything personally. The householder there, the landowner who hired these laborers, in an out of ordinary way, chose to pay them in an out of ordinary way, kind of a peculiar way. He arranged it so that those who first came were served and were paid last. So the ones that were hired last came first to get their pay. God's pay is not a hiring of what we deserve, but rather a gift of bounty, of favor. He paid on the scale of grace and not on the rate of merit. In the parable, the householder gave every man a penny, a denarius, a day's wage, a good pay for that time. So to those who began work at the 11th hour, they were paid a full day's wage for only 1 hour worth of work. Here is a display of boundless bounty of the householder. Some who have served God for a brief time, converted, regenerated late in life, have equaled or even excelled those who have been believers for many years, having been consecrated and obtained the full result of grace at a speedy rate. God will place in heavenly glory those who turn to Christ even at the last. Verses 10 through 12, it says, But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and the heat of the day. I believe the laborers that who were hired first and worked the whole day had their pride hurt a little bit about being paid after the others. But as it says here in verse 10, I think that they were more likely thinking to themselves that if these guys got a whole day's wage for working just 1 hour, boy, we're going to rack up. We are going to make some money today. Standing in line, they're probably already spending their money in their head. Have a nice dinner this evening, pay some bills, put some in savings, buy a new camel. All these things they had in their head that they were going to do with this money. They had a plan generated. Then they got to their pay, to the time when the money was handed out, and things went off the rails for them. As we talked about God's grace in this parable, it's also important that we consider God's sovereignty too. Verse 10, it says, they supposed. And there's the difficulty that they had, the problem that they ran into. These first set of laborers had developed a theory to support. They were filled with all these legal principles. They had what was promised to them. Verse 10 says, they received every man a penny. What more could they expect? They got exactly what they agreed upon. But they felt that they were cheated because they worked 12 hours a day out in the hot boiling sun for the same wage as the group that worked only 1 hour. They had a supposition. They had a belief. They had an idea to justify. And they were upset because it didn't develop to the way that they thought that it should. God will not be bound by our supposings. And we deceive ourselves if we think that He will. So the laborers rebelled against the sovereignty of the grace of the landowner of this householder. The landowner gave all the workers the same wage no matter how long they worked, whether they were there an hour, 3 hours, 12 hours, whatever. It's the landowner's money. He can do with it whatever he wants to do. It's his money. It's the kindness of the landowner to hire these laborers. He didn't need the other workers, but hired them anyway to give them a job, thereby showing them grace. And God can do whatever He wants to also. He is sovereign. He can distribute His blessing however He wants. If we have anything at all, whether it's a good financial situation, a good job, a nice house, good health, whatever it is, it's by God's grace. We didn't deserve any of it. God can choose to give person A 1 blessing. He can choose to give person B 2 blessings. He can choose to give person C 3 blessings, and so on and so on and so on. It's His blessings to give. He is sovereign. The Pharisees did not understand this, nor did they like this, that grace is not fair and it cannot be earned. We see in verse 11 that as soon as these first laborers had that penny in their hand, they also had a murmur in their mouth. It was a fair wage. It was what they had agreed to take and to be paid. But when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house. His only conceivable fault was that as a good man, he was too good to these short-timers. God does, at times, greatly bless those whose working lives are short, those who are saved late in life. He doesn't measure work as we do, by a measuring stick or by the hour or by quantity or by time. God is sovereign. He knows our motives. He has His own very gracious ways of evaluating service. If we look at 2 examples from the Bible, the first being John. John we talked about a few weeks ago. He was an apostle, a long-time follower of Christ, a disciple of Christ. John had many great works for the Lord. The other example being the dying thief on the cross, whom Christ told, "Today thou shalt be with me in paradise." He had no works. Both received eternal life. Both received the riches of the grace of God. In verse 12, as the laborers saw this great grace displayed by the landowner, by the householder here, their envious hearts grew sour, and the jealousy within them began to swell up. They said it wasn't that the generous landowner had lowered them, but rather he had advanced the others who only worked an hour. Their complaint was, "Thou hast made them equal unto us." Their quarrel, what they were upset about, wasn't about the work ethic, wasn't about the wage really, or anything else. It was because the landowner was generous. The Pharisees did not want God to be generous to others. They wanted more. They wanted the most of anyone else because in their minds and in their wicked hearts, they did more. In this parable, the landowner used his own money as he pleased, even as God dispenses grace as He wills sovereignty. God is never unjust to anyone, and His gifts of blessings, He will not be bound by our ideas or what we think fairness is. Had the laborers been of the right sort, they would have rejoiced that they just had been able to give the generous landowner a good, fair day's work. The religious crowd, what do? Complain, gripe, bellyache, murmur, complain. But those that are filled with grace, they were thankful. They were rejoicing. It's a great privilege to be serving the Lord throughout a long life. And for a believer, those that have been regenerated and have enjoyed this high favor, this high approval, are deeply indebted to the grace of God. Blessed be our Father. Some of us have been servants from an early age. Others have endured much labor for His name's sake. But in this we all rejoice greatly and magnify His love. Now let's look at verses 13 through 15. 13 through 15. But he answered one of them and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil, because I am good? Verse 13, we see the landowner answer and respond to this grumbling, this murmuring. He hired each one of the laborers individual, and here he's responding to just one of them, which is enough. He calmly and reasonably replied, Friend, I do thee no wrong. If the Lord rewards us graciously for what we do, we are not wronged because another who has done less has a similar compensation. God always delivers and is always faithful. What He says He will do, He does. But at times, we see others, and they appear to be better off than we are. And we get upset. We grumble. We complain because we don't have more. We forget what God has done for us. He owes us nothing. What God has done in our lives, He has done no wrong. In verse 14 and 15, we see a good illustration of the sovereignty of divine grace. Each man shall have all he can claim. Take that thine is, and having it, let him rest content. Go thy way. The Lord will not be ruled by our regulations, but says and declares here, I will give unto this last, even as unto thee. He continues and asks, Is it not lawful for me to do what I will, saith my own? If the Lord gives mercy, He gives it as He pleases. And if the reward, the blessing of service be of grace, well, then the Lord will supply it, will show it according to His own pleasure. Romans 9:15 says, For He saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. At the end of verse 15 in our text here this morning, the landowner asks, Is thine eye evil because I am good? In other words, does it make you jealous to see others enjoy my reward, my blessings? Because I am good and merciful and graceful to those who deserved so little, does this deprive you of the good which I have granted to you? We should never envy or be jealous of a convert's blessings, their joy, or their usefulness, but rather be happy, rejoice, and applaud the sovereignty which blesses them so greatly. We share the same mercy with them, so let's give them equal portion of our joy. It's not the amount of time which you serve, nor the prominence or the importance of your position which determines your reward. Rather, you will be rewarded for your faithfulness to the task which God has given you to perform, regardless of how small, how short, or how insignificant it appears. Moving on to verse 16, it says, So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen. Here Jesus is repeating what He said at the very beginning in chapter 19, verse 30. He reiterates, lets us know that the precedence in the kingdom of heaven is according to the order of grace. The king will rule in his own court. Who shall question his will? As he is king, it is his right to rule. His loyal subjects are ever ready to support their sovereign Lord. Our King reigns with divine authority and cannot do any wrong. So we ask ourselves, where do we fall? Are we part of the first laborers that started at dawn at 6 a.m., or those at noon, or those at 3 p.m.? For me, I was hired at 5 p.m. I received a full day's pay, but I do not deserve it. Only by the grace of God am I here. Nothing that I did or could ever even think about doing. It was all the work of Christ. So why is the last first? Because they know that they truly should have been last and are only there by the grace of God. So let's reread our text this morning. But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out at about the third hour, and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. Again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out, and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. And so when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard said unto his stewards, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came that were hired, about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more. And they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last, even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil, because I am good? So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen. That's what I have this morning, so we'll open it up for discussion, some ideas, thoughts, things to add. Mr. Dan, yes.
I'm hearing something kind of a common thread between this and the lesson from Psalm 1 that we've had tonight for breakfast, and that is the human way of looking at things needs to be backwards from God's way of looking at things. Backward, upside down. We need to be careful to seek the leading of the Spirit and the teaching of the Spirit to guide us into the way of truth.
Mm-hmm.
In Psalm 1, the natural way is to look at those desirable actions and say, oh, there's the checklist. Let me work on that, and I can gain God's approval. And that's backwards. God gives us those ability to please Him. Anyway, I'm just seeing some human way is exactly opposite of God's way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
The workers couldn't go in the vineyard until they were called and chosen.
Right.
It was the Lord's choice to go out early, the 3rd hour, the 9th hour, and the 11th hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's God's time,
Mm-hmm.
God's work, and by the grace of God. Say anybody is regardless of age.
Mm-hmm. Right.
God's work through
Absolutely.
The need, the need was exactly the same for everybody. It is for us.
Mm-hmm.
Where he ended up, verse 30, speaking about eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
Not a greater statement to say.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Seems like in our fallen condition, in our sinful condition, that we hate equality. We don't want people to be equal. We want to be better and have more. We think we deserve more. That was their problem. Why are these guys being made equal with us? We've experienced the heat of the day.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone through things they haven't gone through. We've experienced things they haven't experienced. So we deserve more. They deserve less. That seems to be, as Dan said, um, the human way, the fallen way of looking at things. And God says that's not the way the kingdom of heaven is.
Right.
It's all by grace. None of you deserve anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the theme of selflessness and self-sacrifice, we have to understand we don't deserve anything. And if someone else has not experienced the hardships we have, that's God's choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's God's prerogative. That's God's sovereignty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our society today teaches the opposite. That you're the one. I watch a lot of the sporting events and different things, and you see more and more as they interview after a win. Um, there's no humility there. It's all because I'm the best that there ever was, and I'm doing what I was supposed to do. And you see so much arrogance in things. You see very little humility in people, and where the church plays such an important, vital role as the world is teaching this, we have such an important role to teach the opposite. The opposite. You're right.
If you're working someplace, and you have a certain salary, and then they hire somebody brand new,
Mm-hmm.
you find out they're making more than you are making, you're going to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
Although you're making exactly what you agreed that you would make.
Right. Absolutely.
So it's that sinful nature we have that just wants us to
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit, we're a little bit better than everybody.
Mm-hmm. We have our idea of what's fair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair if I make more than you.
Exactly.
It's not fair if you make more than me.
Exactly. Exactly. That early on in management with some of the folks, you never told anybody what anybody made, because that could create a brouhaha sometimes. That was all kept silent. Now, if you wanted to share your salary with somebody, you go ahead and do that. That's your prerogative, I guess. But none of the management staff shared anything of that information. Strive. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Older guys that hired in, they were hired in at like $3, $4, $5 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
On into the 70s, people were hiring in at $7, $8 an hour. They bringing these people in. It would have took me 10 years to get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The human nature of us, if we could look at it from a spiritual context, the value of a person, not the value of God's grace. We forget that it was God first.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Still.
All righty. Good discussion, guys. Anyone else?
You look
Yes.
at the great men of the past, the Luthers, and
Mm-hmm.
these men who God greatly used.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I'm going to get the same thing they got that they did. and I'm so much less than they are. But in God's kingdom, everybody gets the same.
Right. Absolutely.
Start to look and say, okay, I got saved early. I got to serve the Lord. Am I jealous of this older man who got saved? Did I enjoy serving the Lord, or is I considered it drudgery?
Right. Exactly. It's a privilege. Hmm We should be more thankful that we got to do, more. Hmm All right. Anyone else? All right. If not, we'll close out. Brother Craig, do you mind closing us out this morning?